Today, we're going back to the 70s to explore the world of Easter Seals camps in British Columbia. And we're using an amazing source you gave us, a first-hand account from someone who directed those camps.
Yeah, it's fascinating. What's so captivating is how personal it is. It's not just dates and facts. It's like a vibrant tapestry woven from actual experiences, anecdotes, and insights into a very specific time and place in the evolution of disability services.
It's like a time capsule. Rustic conditions, the unique personalities, and all the unexpected things, the challenges, the good stuff of managing a diverse community in a setting that's idyllic but also demanding. We'll see how these personal experiences reflect the bigger picture of societal attitudes towards disability during this era.
Definitely. And it's important to remember this. Easter Seals, the organization behind these camps, has been huge in providing services and advocating for people with disabilities for decades. So we're not just looking at a camp. It's a glimpse into a much larger movement.
Absolutely. Let's jump in. Our deep dive starts at Camp Cowichan in 1973. The source describes a hiring process that was almost like fate. They walked into an interview for a camp counselor position and walked out the camp director.
Wow. It really shows you how things were different back then, more improvisational. But it also shows the source's ability to just step up.
The camp itself sounds like something out of a storybook. Early rustic is how they put it. Basic accommodations. A lake that seemed bottomless. It really paints a picture of a simpler time.
That description definitely makes you think of simpler times, but it also makes you wonder about the resources available for disability services back then. Were these rustic conditions on purpose, or just what they had to work with? It's something to think about.
And about that seemingly endless lake, there's a story about a camper named Timothy who had epilepsy. He had a seizure while swimming and sank.
Oh, gosh, that's scary. It reminds you need to be constantly vigilant when working with individuals with diverse needs. And having well-trained staff is so important, ready to respond to emergencies. Thankfully, the lifeguards were quick. Their CPR training saved the day.
That fast thinking really shows you how dedicated the camp staff were. But even in this idyllic setting, real life doesn't go away. There's a story about the camp cook, Jeremiah Simpson. He was a seasoned logging camp cook, known for his skills and his struggles with alcohol.
Yeah, Jeremiah. His story reminds you, even in these beautiful places, life is still tough. And his outburst, blaming you fucking Americans for taking his job, shows you some of the tensions back then, maybe simmering beneath the surface.
Definitely. The source knew about Jeremiah's drinking, but it still came to a head one Sunday. He showed up drunk. The source had no choice but to let him go. That couldn't have been easy.
It makes you wonder how common that was back then, and how camps handled such sensitive issues, especially when addiction wasn't viewed the same way it is today.
For sure. And once Jeremiah left, the staff had to figure out how to feed everyone. They even had a rainy day thing making bannock bread. Sounds simple but delicious.
That's resourceful. It's clear they were dedicated to making things work for the campers, even when things went wrong. And sometimes it's those simple solutions that stick with you.
Now let's move ahead a few years to 1976. Our source goes to Camp Squamish. It was more modern, but there's this charming log cabin that really caught their eye.
Interesting. Even with modern facilities, that rustic charm was still appealing. It tells you something about the lasting power of nature and simplicity.
Yes, and at Camp Squamish we meet Molly, a camper with hydrocephalus. The counselor was terrified, saying, "I can't do this."
Wow. It reminds you that back then, even people who wanted to help might not have understood different disabilities. The fear makes sense, even if it's misplaced.
Yeah, and the source stepped in, telling the counselor, "Molly's a person." It's a simple but powerful statement. It tells you to see beyond the diagnosis and see the individual.
A theme we'll see again and again. And while views on disability were changing, there were still obstacles, even in a place meant to support people with disabilities.
Now remember how the source was told to stay away from the local Squamish Lions Club? They didn't listen. They built strong connections with the community, especially with Ken Ramus and Almir.
It shows you sometimes you got to go against the grain. Those connections were really helpful, weren't they?
They were. The camp got 6 new canoes for their program at Alice Lake. The source really believed in aquatics for everyone. They had strict safety protocols to make sure all the campers had a good time.
Makes the story about the pontoon boat accident at Camp Cowichan even sadder. It reminds you, even with the best intentions and safety measures, accidents happen, and the impact is huge. 7 campers drowned when that boat flipped. Must have been devastating for everyone.
Absolutely. You feel the emotion in the source's words. It's a reminder that these camps, even with all the joy and laughter, were still a part of real life, with its ups and downs.
And it's interesting how the source kept the canoe program going at Camp Squamish, even after that tragedy. They argued the canoes were much safer than the pontoon boat, and thankfully they were allowed to continue.
Speaking of advocating for what you believe in, we have Robbie, a camper with Down syndrome, who was clearly very special to the source. They had a lot of adventures together, like early morning bear hunts at the local dump.
Where they never saw any bears, but Robbie's imagination went wild.
Exactly. The source loved Robbie's playfulness. They even went on a crazy airplane ride together. A little scary, too.
The airplane ride. These stories really show you the deep connections between the source and the campers. It was more than just staff and camper.
They really did. The source even describes getting swept up in the disco fever. While performing with Robbie at one of the camp's Saturday night dances, the source describes it so vividly, starting with a parade of wheels, ending with Robbie's air guitar to Stayin' Alive, with the source joining in for a full-on imaginary jam session.
Those dances sound amazing, full of joy and energy. It's a reminder that sometimes letting loose and just being in the moment can be so freeing for both people with disabilities and those who support them.
It is beautiful. And life at camp wasn't all big events and disco fever. There were the small, everyday things that make any community what it is.
Like that time Robbie lost his pants and danced around his room, completely unaware, with the source peeking in, trying not to laugh.
It's those little things that bring the story to life. They remind us that even in a camp for people with disabilities, life is full of those universal, sometimes funny moments that connect us all.
It's about finding the special in the everyday and realizing that we're all human, no matter our differences.
And sometimes that connection comes in unexpected ways, like with a horse named Kelly.
Kelly. Her arrival at Camp Squamish brought the riding program, which everyone loved. It brought so much joy and was therapeutic for the campers.
The way the source describes getting Kelly is hilarious, especially that talk with the rancher during the inspection. And then the mounting platform they made for wheelchair users shows how dedicated they were to making the riding program open to everyone.
It shows how resourceful they were and that they believe that everyone should experience the joy of connecting with a horse, like Kelly.
And Kelly was special. She had amazing intuition, a horse sense, as the source says.
Yeah.
During an open house, she just stopped, wouldn't move. Turns out a little boy wandered into the paddock and was right under Kelly's hoof. She sensed the danger and protected him.
Wow, that's amazing. The bond between humans and animals, and how animals can sense things we can't. No wonder the source loved Kelly so much.
Not all adventures at Camp Squamish were so nice. One rainy day, feeling a little impulsive, the source took 3 adult campers on a drive down a logging road.
Uh-oh. What happened on that logging road?
You guessed it. The van slid down a muddy slope, almost ended up in a lake. It shows that even when you mean well, things can go wrong, especially with unpredictable weather and tough terrain.
It's like they say, the best laid plans often go awry, and it reminds you to plan carefully and assess risks, especially when you're responsible for others.
Luckily, no one was hurt.
Yeah.
But it must have been scary. And it wasn't the only thing that taught them valuable lessons.
You're always learning, right, from the good and the bad.
Exactly. And talking about lessons learned, there are 2 stories from Camp Squamish that show how important communication is, and empathy, and understanding each person's needs.
So crucial, those things, especially when working with people with disabilities. Everyone is unique. What works for one person might not work for another.
Absolutely. First story. Marilyn, a camper with multiple sclerosis. She got upset when the source tilted her wheelchair. They didn't realize her neck muscles were weak. An honest mistake, but it shows you, even small things can have a big impact on someone.
You have to take the time to understand each person, their needs and limits. Don't assume anything.
The other one was about a counselor, Bruce. Trying to help, he lost his grip on a wheelchair, with 2 campers in it, going down a steep hill. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt. But it was a tough lesson. Be mindful, be responsible. Know that even a small mistake can have consequences.
It happens. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that you learn from them. Take responsibility. And always try to improve, especially when you're taking care of others.
Before we move on, there's one more story about how our understanding of disability has changed and the power of language. Remember that banner Mr. St. Dennis wanted at the 1973 open house at Camp Cowichan?
The one with the outdated wording.
Yeah, the one that said, "No man stands so tall as he who stoops to help a crippled child." Even back then, they knew it was wrong.
We wouldn't say that today. It shows how people saw disability back then as something to pity, not something to empower.
What's inspiring is that the staff, led by our source, got rid of it quietly. A small act of defiance. It showed that things were changing, even if slowly.
It shows you Even small actions can challenge those old ways of thinking and make things more inclusive and respectful.
It's a great example. Individual actions, even small ones, can contribute to bigger change. And that's something we'll keep seeing as we go on.
I'm ready for more.
Great. But first, let's appreciate the heart of Camp Squamish. Marion Goodwin, the camp cook.
Marion. She sounds wonderful, a kind Englishwoman who loved children and animals.
She adds so much warmth to the story. Remember the story about the eagles dropping salmon and her whippets would bring the scraps back to her? It's such a nice detail. It shows how connected everyone was, humans and animals.
It shows you the whole camp experience. Nature, community, and personal growth all mixed together. And it leads us into the next part, the lasting impact of all this.
I can't wait to hear more. So after a quick break, we'll continue our journey back to those Easter Seals camps in the 1970s.
Welcome back. As we learn more about these Easter Seals camps in the 70s, it's clear these weren't just summer jobs. They changed people. They left a mark. Yeah, you see that in what the source says. They talk about how powerful these camps were, breaking down barriers, creating a sense of belonging, and changing how people saw disability. Really moving.
You can feel it, the emotion in their words, seeing these changes happen right in front of them. And they talk about something interesting, how these camps, meant to give special support, were also kind of a form of exclusion.
That's a good point. It makes you think, even when you're trying to help. Separating people with disabilities, even if it's for their own good, can make them feel different, like they don't belong.
It's complicated, right? The source seems to struggle with that, giving dedicated support, but also wanting real inclusion. It's a discussion that's still going on today.
And it shows how our ideas about disability have evolved. How we support people has changed. What was seen as progressive in the 70s might be different now. We should always be questioning things, looking for ways to be more inclusive and fair.
One of the most powerful things the source says is about the camp community. They write, camps are communities, maybe unlike any other. Places where boundaries disappear because we're all human. Disability turns into diversity, and in the end, it's just humanity.
That's beautiful. It sums up what makes these camps so special. They're a place where being different is not just okay, it's celebrated. You connect with people through shared experiences, a feeling of belonging.
And it's not just the campers. The staff, like our source, were changed by their time at camp. They learned about empathy, adaptability, and challenging their own ideas.
Sounds like everyone who went to those camps was changed in some way. It shows you real inclusion benefits everyone, not just the people who are usually left out.
As we get to the end of our deep dive, I'm amazed by how much we've covered. We've seen the challenges and successes of running these camps, the amazing people who made the community, and what it was like to be disabled in the 70s.
And we've had these personal reflections to guide us, someone who was actually there. It's so much richer than just reading a history book.
For sure. What stood out to you as our listener? Was it a specific camper, the dedication of the staff, or how society was changing its views on disability?
There's so much to think about here. It's interesting to see what different people connect with.
What makes this deep dive so interesting is that it's not just about the past. It's about learning from these experiences and using them in our own lives today.
Exactly. The things we've been talking about, inclusion, empathy, community, resilience, they're always important. These are values we can all try to live by, no matter who we are or where we've been.
As we wrap up, here's a thought for you. What are the lasting lessons from these camps? And how can we use them to build more inclusive and supportive communities in our own lives?
That's a question worth thinking about. Maybe by looking at the past, we can find ways to create a better future, one that's more just and compassionate.
Beautifully said. And with that, I want to thank you, our listener, for coming with us on this incredible journey back to the world of Easter Seals camps.
It's been an honor to explore these stories and discover the lessons they hold.
And if you're inspired to learn more, check out the History of Disability Services, the work being done by groups like Easter Seals today. Or just think about your own experiences, how they can help you build a more inclusive world.
Remember, we're all in this together. Every voice, every action counts when it comes to understanding and inclusion.
Thanks again for listening. We'll see you on our next deep dive.
Happy exploring.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
How these simple things from summer camp can have such a big impact.
It is. Human connection is so powerful. Shared experiences, too. Summer camp, work, school, even just where you live. Those things. Inclusion, empathy, understanding, they can change everything.
I agree. And it's not about knowing it all or being perfect. It's about being open, learning, challenging what we think, and making sure everyone feels valued. and respected.
Like those staff members, they had to adapt, learn as they went. We can all do that too. When we're trying to make the world a better place, it's a journey, not a finish line.
And sometimes the biggest changes start with small steps, like when they got rid of that banner. It seems small, but it shows a change in thinking, a willingness to challenge the way things are.
Totally. We don't have to wait for huge changes to make a difference. We can all do our part every day. And how we talk to each other, the choices we make.
So as we finish up, I hope you feel hopeful and maybe have a little bit of that camp spirit, that joy, that openness to what's different, and believing in the power of community.
It's been wonderful talking about this with you. It gives you a look into a different time. But the lessons are always there for everyone.
And to you, our listener, thank you for being here with us. We hope this made you think and maybe inspired you to explore these things in your own life.
Remember, every step counts, even a small one, when it comes to understanding each other and making the world more inclusive.
That's it for the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep making the world a place where everyone belongs.
See you around.